The Elephant's Child, a story puppeteered by Ainsley, Lincoln, Nadine, Marco, and Lena. Long, long ago, the elephant had no trunk. He had only a blackish, bulgy nose as big as a boot that he could wiggle about from side to side. However, he could not pick things up with it. There was a new elephant, a baby elephant, an elephant's child who was full of curiosity, and he asked ever so many questions. He asked his tall aunt, the giraffe, why she was so tall, and in return she just spanked him for asking way too many questions. He was always asking everybody far too many questions. One fine morning, the elephant's child asked a new question he had never asked before. He asked, what does the crocodile have for dinner? Everybody said, shh, in a loud and dreadful tone. And they spanked him immediately, without stopping for a long time. Later that afternoon, he went for a long walk in the forest and came upon the cocoa bird sitting in the middle of a bush. The elephant asked the cocoa bird, my father has spanked me and my mother has spanked me. My aunt the giraffe has spanked me for my curiosity. But I still want to know what the crocodile has for dinner. And then the cocoa bird flapped its wings and said with a mournful cry, go to the banks of the great green, greasy river, set all about with trees, and find out. That very next morning, the elephant's child took 100 pounds of bananas and said to his dear family, goodbye, I am going to the river to find out what the crocodile has for dinner. And so there he went. He walked from Grahamstown to Kimberley, eating melons all the time, till at last he came to the banks of the great green river, precisely as the bird had said. Now you must know and understand that until that very week or hour, this elephant's child had never seen a crocodile, did not know what one was like. The first thing that he found right by the river was a bicolored python snake, curled around a rock. The snake was long and slithery, and the elephant child turned to the snake and said, excuse me, but have you seen such a thing as a crocodile in these parts? Have I seen a crocodile? Said the snake in a voice of scorn. What will you ask me next? But excuse me, said the little child, but could you kindly tell me what the crocodile has for dinner? It was then that the snake uncoiled himself very quickly from the rock and spanked the elephant child with his scalesome, fearsome tail. That is odd, said the elephant child, because my father, my mother, and my great-aunt Giraffe have all spanked me for my unending curiosity. I suppose this is the same thing. So he said goodbye very politely to the snake and helped him to coil up on the rock again. And he went on just a little warm, but not at all astonished, eating melons and throwing the rind about because he could not pick it up. Until the elephant's child trod on what he thought was a log of wood at the very edge of the river. However, it was really the crocodile, and the crocodile winked one eye. Excuse me, said the elephant's child most politely, but do you happen to have seen a crocodile in these parts? It was just then that the crocodile lifted his tail out of the mud, and the elephant's child stepped back most politely because he did not wish to be spanked again. Come hither, little one, said the crocodile. Why do you ask such things? Come hither, for I am the crocodile. Then the elephant's child grew all breathless and panted and kneeled down on the bank and said, why, you are the very person that I have been looking for all of these long days. Will you please tell me what you have for dinner? Come hither, little one, said the crocodile, and I'll whisper. And when the elephant's child put his head down close to the crocodile's musky-tusky tooth, the crocodile caught him by the nose. Which, up to that very week and minute, had been no bigger than a boot. "I think," said the crocodile, and he said it between his teeth, "I think I will begin today with the elephant's child." And the crocodile grabbed the elephant's nose in its teeth. At that moment, the elephant's child was much annoyed and said, speaking through his nose like this, "Let go, you're hurting me." Then the snake scuffled down from the bank and said, "My young friend, if you do not now immediately pull as hard as ever, it is my opinion that your acquaintance the crocodile will jerk you into the stream before you can say Jack Robinson." Then the elephant's child sat back on his haunches and pulled and pulled and pulled, and his nose began to stretch. And the crocodile floundered in the water, making it all creamy with great sweeps of his tail. And the crocodile pulled and pulled and pulled. The elephant's child's nose kept on stretching and stretching, and the elephant's child spread all his little legs apart and pulled and pulled. His nose just kept on stretching, and the crocodile threshed his tail like an oar. He pulled and pulled and pulled, and at each pull the elephant's child's nose grew longer and longer. It hurt him so terribly. Then the elephant's child felt his legs slipping, and he said, through his nose, which was now nearly 5 feet long, "This is too much for me." Just then the snake came down the bank. He knotted himself around the elephant's hind legs, and he said to the elephant, "We will now seriously devote ourselves to a little high tension, because if we do not, it is my impression that this here crocodile will permanently eliminate your future career." So he pulled, and the elephant's child pulled, and the snake pulled, and the crocodile pulled. But the snake pulled hardest, and at last the crocodile let go of the elephant's nose with a plop you could hear all up and down the river. The elephant's child, with his new nose, sat down on the ground, but first he said thank you to the snake. He wrapped his nose up in cool banana leaves and hung it up in the great green, gray, greasy river to cool. "What are you doing that for?" asked the snake. "Excuse me," said the elephant's child, "but my nose is badly out of shape, and I am waiting for it to shrink." "Then you will have to wait a long time," said the snake. "Some people do not know what is good for them." The elephant's child sat there for 3 days, waiting for his nose to shrink. He climbed up to the top of the tree to get a look on where he was at. At the end of a 3rd day, a fly came and stung him on the shoulder. Before he knew what he was doing, he lifted up his trunk and hit that fly dead with the end of his trunk. "Advantage number 1, said the snake, who was watching nearby. "You couldn't have done that with a mere smear nose. Try and eat a little melons off the tree now." Before he thought about what he was doing, the elephant put out his trunk and plucked a large bundle of grass. He dusted it clean against his forelegs and stuffed it into his mouth. "Advantage number 2, said the snake. "You couldn't have done that with a mere smear nose. Don't you think the sun is very hot here?" "It is," said the elephant's child, and before he thought about what he was doing, he slooped up some mud from the banks of the river and slapped it on his head. "Advantage number 3, said the snake, slithering up a tree. "You couldn't have done that with a mere smear nose." So the elephant's child went home across Africa, frisking and whisking his trunk. When he wanted fruit to eat, he pulled fruit down from a tree, instead of waiting for it to fall as he used to. When he wanted grass, he plucked grass from the ground, instead of going on his knees as he used to. When flies bit him, he broke off the branch of a tree and used it as a whisk. He made himself a new, cool, slushy, squishy mudcap whenever the sun was too hot. When he felt lonely, he sang to himself through his trunk, and the nose was louder than several brass bands. And ever since that day, O children, all the elephants you will ever see, besides those that you won't, have trunks precisely like the trunk of that first curious elephant's child. The end. Now all puppets come on screen again for a bow. All right, looking good.